Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your appearance today, and thank you for being once again willing to serve your country. General Stewart, what's your assessment of the impacts and challenges to the Department of Defense's readiness as a result of 7 years of the Budget Control Act and repeated continuing resolutions?
It's been devastating. You have to have a consistent budget that you can count on to make long-range plans.
Many members of Congress were celebrating spiking the football a couple of months ago when Congress passed a 2-year budget and then a 1-year omnibus spending bill to implement the first year of that 2-year budget. Those are good things for the military. How important is it, though, that we implement the second year of that budget in a timely fashion by passing the Department of Defense appropriations bill this summer?
It's very important. And then a continuation on that for 2020.
That's my next question, which is that 2-year budget expires now in less than 18 months. The budget caps and sequestration of the Budget Control Act return in FY 2020 and 2021, which is, say, October 1, 2019. How important is it that this Congress act to repeal those caps and sequestration as we have failed to do for the last 7 years under the Budget Control Act?
I think Secretary Mattis has made it very clear that that's very important, Senator.
Thank you. I want to turn now to a broad question about the health of retention and keeping our troops on board. I'll start with a specific example from the Army. There's been some reporting recently about the Army reducing and not meeting its recruiting goals. Spoke with Secretary Esper about this. He said that's not exactly right. So part of it's the result of the Congress not doing our job in a timely fashion. One of, I forget which version of the NDA last year, set a 10,000 goal, 10,000 man goal for recruiting. Another one set 5,000. The Army went with the more conservative version, so they set it first at 10,000. When we compromised between the two chambers, it was at 7,500. So that accounts for 2,500 personnel reduction. But then the Army succeeded in retaining more than its initial target. And because they have an overall cap, they had to reduce recruiting by a resulting level. So that's good news for retention. Obviously, recruiting, though, is still strained. Can you talk a little bit about what we're doing in the department to succeed in retention and what we can do to improve a little bit on recruiting?
Well, Senator, I haven't been read in on exactly what they're doing, but if confirmed, I would get back with you to see what they currently are doing. As far as the future for recruiting, I think it's very, very important that we understand that we're looking for a different type of individual. They're social media oriented. I think the previous Secretary of Defense, Secretary Carter, had some unique ideas on the force of the future that we might look at and pursue. If confirmed, I would go ahead and look at those as a starting point and then work from there.
And what about retention? What is your sense of why we are succeeding on retention? Beating our goals. What are the key factors, do you think, that we're getting our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines and their families to say we want to sign up for another hitch?
I think we're providing a very good benefits package for them, Senator. I think it's equatable. It's equally. It equates very easily with the civilian community. In other words, it's very favorable for them. They like the stability, I think, in many cases. The changes that have been made, I think, are important as far as stability, as far as movement, those kinds of things. And so I think the leadership is starting to listen to the ideas that are out there, and thus it is having a tremendous impact on our retention.
Thank you for those answers. And thank you in particular for noting the non-monetary reasons why our troops re-enlist. I think that's important. This Congress has done a pretty good job over the last 15 years of trying to keep pace with civilian pay and benefit packages, but we'll never be able to keep pace entirely, especially in some certain critical skills, which leads me, Mr. Slavonic, to my final question for you. That's about Navy and Marine Corps aviation. We've seen the Air Force struggle to get the number of pilots it needs, in part because of the issues that General Stewart and I were just raising. Our military is never going to be able to pay pilots what the private airlines or private charters can pay. Senator King and I have had private roundtables with company-grade pilots about how they want to fly. They are staying in the service because they joined to fly a high-performance aircraft in defense of our nation. They like the bonuses, but the bonuses are never going to match what they get in civilian life. I'm beginning to see reports that the Navy and Marine Corps may face the same stress on its pilots. Could you talk a little bit about the status of the pilot force, as you understand it, in the Navy and Marine Corps, and what the Department of the Navy can do to make sure that we keep the appropriate number of pilots in the service?
Yes, sir. As you stated, the Navy and Marine Corps are beginning to have problems in that area. As Mr. Stewart stated, it's not always about the money, the compensation. So I have to think that we have to be more creative. We have to maybe develop a program where we keep those Southwest American Airline pilots who left the Navy, somehow be able to create a flow-in, flow-out ability to keep them in the reserves, allow them to work on the, but yet, if and when the balloon goes up, that we can call them and ask them to come and serve. So I think we need to be more, work harder in that area than we have in the past. I know that program is there, but I think recruiting, we just have to work that much harder.
General Stewart, you raise your hand.
Yes, sir. If you had the conversation with those company-grade pilots, I'm sure they told you that they want to fly. And so ultimately, if the dollars are not there to keep their training up, to keep their proficiency, they're going to leave. And so ultimately, having the training dollars to go ahead and train and do what they love to do does have an impact on retention.
Thank you. My time has expired, but Drs. Porters, Anderson, and Vernon, sorry we didn't get to you. You've got very important jobs, and thank you for being willing to do them.
Thank you, Senator Cotton.